What's up, metalheads? Welcome to the Scrap Metal Podcast, the show for the misfits who've been listening to the same music since high school. I'm your host, John von Frankenstein, and joining me today is my metal thrashing mad co-host, Chris. Chris, I gotta ask you, man, how you feeling?
I gotta say, I am feeling cultured.
Cultured? Okay, let's twirl the mustaches, put on our berets, and grab our low-fat, gluten-free, homogeneous and tofu-based coffee. Chris, does this feeling of I forget what you actually said now, does this feeling of the thing that you mentioned before have anything to do with how you're keeping your heavy metal street cred?
The thing that I mentioned before, cultured, might have something to do with my heavy metal street cred. I've certainly been spending some time appreciating creativity and art because I recently visited for the first time ever the Museum of Modern Art.
There you go. The MoMA.
Yes. And I finally went, saw Van Gogh's Starry Night, my all-time favorite painting. And then there was a lot of really cool stuff, lots of stuff from Piet Mondrian, a lot of stuff from Jackson Pollock. So a lot of really cool, abstract and modern art that I really enjoyed. They also had a big display of all of Andy Warhol's soup cans, which reminded me of the time that I got a professor extremely mad at me in college when I started talking shit about Andy Warhol. So that was fun to reminisce about. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to go. And the museum is so big. I only saw the 4th and 5th floor.
Okay.
And there's 6 floors in total.
Yeah.
I was going to go to the 6th floor because it's named after the owner of the New York Mets. So I was going to go check out that special exhibit, but didn't get a chance. But yeah, the 4th and 5th floor alone had a lot of really cool stuff. Spent a lot of time in the gift shop and the store and spent a bunch of money on everything that had Starry Night or Mondrian artwork on it. But it was really cool and it was a lot of fun. And it was great to, see this art. I think what's so cool about it is that I've seen so much of this artwork online, and Van Gogh's Starry Night was about the size I expected it to be. Mondrian's work, much smaller than I thought.
Oh, okay.
Salvador Dali's Persistence of Memory is like the size of a sheet of paper. Yeah. You stand in a single file line and put your face right up to it to actually get a good look at it. So it's really cool to get a sense of not just what the artwork looks like, but the scale of the artwork. And it was a lot of fun to actually get to appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh my God. I remember when I had visited Amsterdam and went to the Rijksmuseum and saw a bunch of Van Gogh's art as well.
Yeah.
And the Van Gogh Museum out there too. And you're right. Just getting to see something where you're we're so used to seeing prints of things and artwork as murals, where when you get to see the original piece, it's shocking.
Yeah.
The size of it. So yeah, it's incredible to do something like that. Mondrian, I don't know that I know their pieces, not by name anyway.
You would definitely know their artwork. My favorite of Mondrian's artwork are his compositions, which is a blank white canvas with black lines, and then the squares are filled in with red or blue or yellow. So if you've seen the artwork, you've probably seen the artwork and would recognize it if you saw it.
All right.
But you may not know that it's Mondrian who painted it.
You should drop it in right here. Because I'm going to look at it afterwards and go okay, now I feel much more cultured. Yep. Jackson Pollock, I know. I remember the very first time that I created a Jackson Pollock of my own, but everybody yelled at me for doing that. So something about going to a museum is getting to see a collection of artwork. And I love getting to spend time looking at the artwork, admiring it, looking at the craftsmanship that goes into it. And something that I consider an art form in and of itself is making guitars, being a luthier, creating an instrument, knowing what woods will sound best, knowing how to wind the pickups, knowing just where to adjust things so that the instrument is as playable as possible.
Yep.
And that kind of gave me the idea to talk about some really iconic guitars, some of my favorite guitars from some of our favorite guitarists. So today we're talking about the scrap metal guitar collection. We are talking about just those iconic pieces, the iconic instruments that are just as recognizable as the artist's music. Chris, are you excited to start going down the Guitar Center Hall and checking out all of these different guitars, as well as the no stairway sign that's hanging right over there?
I am so excited to discuss the scrap metal guitar collection. We're both musicians. I think you're probably better and more knowledgeable than me when it comes to being a musician. But I think, as fans of music, as fans of metal, there are some iconic guitars out there. You know, I see it all the time, posters or t-shirts that's just like pictures of the guitars.
Yeah.
And don't have the names of the guitarists that play them. And it's so easy for everyone to just look at the pictures of the guitars and say, oh, this is this guy, and this is this one, and this one, and this one.
Yeah.
And it's so cool that you can recognize a guitar player just by their guitar. And it kind of gives you that feeling of like, yeah, this is the music I like, and you associate the music with the guitar. So I'm very excited to talk about this. I'll probably mostly talk about how cool the guitar looks. You can talk about which pickups and Floyd Roses and which woods and all of that and what inlays are in the frets. And I'll just say, yeah, this one has pretty colors.
You know what, though? I love that you mentioned that, because for a lot of us that are fans of music or fans of guitar, and especially in, you know, the rock and metal world, that's the first thing that we gravitate towards is, oh man, look at how cool that guitar is.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very basic thing. Like, I know, self-admittedly, I'm not a car guy. There are very few cars that I'll see and I'm like, wow, that's a really nice car. I really like that car. And I can pick it out from the bunch, because especially nowadays, a lot of cars just look like other cars.
Oh, yeah.
But with an instrument, you're right, there is something that we attach. We are able to make that connection in our brain and say, like, that's the guitar that I recognize from that music video, or that's the guitar that's on that album cover.
Yep.
And that's what I think when you decide to start collecting or start playing a guitar, is the very first thing that you gravitate towards is the look. Like, for me, I remember when I first started playing guitar, all I wanted was an electric guitar that looked like Eric Clapton's Strat. And now Clapton has tons and tons of different iconic guitars. He's got, you know, the psychedelic SG that was painted, and he's got tons of like Firebirds and Flying V's, but the Strat was his most famous. And so when my parents finally got me an electric guitar out of like the Sears catalog, dude, I was over the moon. It was a Strat-shaped guitar, and it was like a tobacco burst kind of like sunburst color to it, and it had the whammy bar, you know. And I felt so cool playing that, because I was like, yeah, it's like Clapton's guitar. And that's what gets us started on that journey, is just wanting to have something that reminds us of maybe our favorite artist or an artist that we really admire. Did you have something similar? Like, when you first started playing guitar, did you go through the same trajectory as me, where like they get you a classical guitar first and you're like, I don't want to play this thing. What are these nylon strings? Give me something with some distortion.
So what's funny is that my dad plays guitar, and so I grew up having a Ovation acoustic, which he mostly played, but as well as his Squier Stratocaster. Nice. And so that was the first electric guitar I played. And then for Christmas one year, I wanted a Les Paul. I didn't care what it looked like. I just wanted a Les Paul body shape, because that's what I loved. And like, I had seen some that were like the Zakk Wylde Spiral Les Paul, or even just like a solid black. And I was like, hey, these look really cool. Christmas morning, I open up this guitar, and it is this weird like indigo colored Les Paul that I think was like a custom paint job that someone didn't pick up or some such nonsense. But I feel like I haven't seen too many other guitars in this color, but it was an
Yeah.
Epiphone Les Paul. It was a cool guitar that, like, in the right light it looked dark, but then in other light you could see like how vibrant the color was, and I just thought it was a cool looking guitar. It was a cool sounding guitar, and like a Les Paul felt like such a versatile guitar. Like, you can play something really heavy, or you can play, some cowboy chords on it. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's what I really liked about having the Les Paul as well. Eventually I had to get myself a Pointy guitar, but I'll get into that later. But yes, my first guitar was actually an Epiphone Les Paul, just because I loved the Les Paul shape. I love the white pick guard, and so that's, the first guitar my parents got me.
Oh man, it's so funny. Like, mentioning the Les Paul. Les Paul's so iconic.
Yeah.
And just the whole entire Gibson line. There is so much history with Gibson guitars, especially with some of these guitars that we're going to talk about. And one of the very first ones that comes to mind is actually not who you may think of when I start talking about the Gibson SG, but it leads us there. So I remember when my parents were like, okay, we're going to upgrade you from your Strat, because like it never mattered to me, and I want to make sure that is said like out loud and up front. It did not matter to me that this was like not an official brand guitar.
Yeah.
But it was a guitar that I could plug in, and I had this tiny little like 5-inch speaker amp. And what I would do to get distortion, because you could get it to distort, you could throw on like the gain channel.
Yeah.
But what I would do is take my dad's headphones like these, plug it into the amp, and turn the volume and the distortion all the way up. And that was the coolest distortion you could ever hear. It was awesome. It sounded so rich, and like I was just throwing so much gain. And obviously I'd never put the headphones on. I would just leave them laying there on the bed.
Yeah.
And that was the sound. But when my parents finally said, okay, cool, you're graduating middle school, we're going to get you a real guitar.
Yeah.
I went into the guitar shop, and there were all these different choices. And, the guy at Sam Ash was like, you could start out with a Strat. And I was like, oh, well, I had that, so I want something a little different. Well, you could go with something like this. And it was like a bunch of Ibanez guitars, and there was little gears and knobs and stuff that I didn't know what they did.
Yeah.
So I was like, nope. And he goes, what about this one? And it was a red cherry Gibson SG. And I was like, oh my God, like Angus Young plays. And he's like, yeah, kind of. And I remember looking through the catalog of Sam Ash, because those used to just come in the mail back in the day.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the SG Gothic series. Gibson had just come out with a Gothic series, like around 2000, 2001. So they made an Explorer, a Flying V, a Les Paul, and an SG. And I was like, I want the SG, but I want the Gothic one. And so my parents like, okay. They saved up, and they bought it for me. But it was all because of the connection that I made with Angus Young of AC/DC. And as famous as his SGs are, there is another young brother in AC/DC whose guitar, in my opinion, is even more iconic. That is Malcolm Young's Gretsch, and it's a 1963 Jet Firebird. And this guitar is just so beefy. It looks like it's a hollow body almost, but it's just this giant bodied guitar.
Yeah.
And the thing about Malcolm's playing was he's the rhythm guitarist of AC/DC, so he's really locking in with the bass and the drums, and he's playing these really big chords while Angus gets to take, the spotlight, and he's doing his duck walk across the stage. Malcolm is just laying back, feet planted on the ground, like he's pulling a Park and Bark pretty much, but in guitar form.
Yeah.
And he's just strumming these chords and strumming the ever-loving shit out of these strings. And he did something that I really love. He threw on a set of 12-gauge guitar strings. So for anyone who starts playing guitar, you know that it's really... it's painful to play when you've never played before, and you start to build these calluses. So normally when you get a guitar, you're getting them with either 9 gauge or 10 gauge strings on them. That's pretty standard. He had 12 gauge strings on there. So it's like playing an acoustic almost. It gives the guitar that same sort of resonance. So that big, beefy guitar chord that you're hearing out of Malcolm Young, a lot of it has to do with those thick strings that are on there and them being able to withstand just how hard he's playing.
Yeah.
Because if you watch any of the live footage, right, you can see how hard he's strumming those strings.
Yeah.
Now, this guitar, Gretsch is really famous for having a bunch of dials and stuff like that you can go ahead and customize and tailor the sound to. Gretsch guitars are really famous for rockabilly. But he said, nope, strip everything out. I just need the guitar, the volume knob, pull out the other 2 pickups because there's 3 pickups on there. And he's like, just leave the bridge pickup on. Yeah. That's all I need. So he took this very elaborate looking guitar and stripped it to its most basic form, which just embodies the feel of AC/DC so well.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I love Malcolm Young's 63 Jet Firebird. It's such a cool guitar.
It's funny, as you talk about Malcolm Young, it makes me think of someone I'll get into because he seems to like to design all of his guitars based on other people's guitars. But I remember seeing an interview with Scott Ian, and he was picking up a bunch of different guitars. And he picked up, I don't remember if it was the exact guitar Malcolm played or like an artist signature series, like recreation from Gretsch. But either way, Scott Ian picks up this guitar and he plays it. And the interviewer is talking to him about like picking up this guitar, which is different from what Scott Ian normally plays. He's up there playing a Jackson, which is the reason I eventually got a Jackson, because the Les Paul is heavy as fuck. And I wanted something that was a lot lighter to play. And Scott Ian is like, I'm used to wanting to play so fast, but even just picking up this guitar, like I just want to chug out some chords. Like I want to just sit there and be that like solid rhythm. And that's something that is so very cool about Malcolm Young, is that Angus took the spotlight, but Malcolm was back there just playing, such a great rhythm, keeping in time. And that's so cool. I'm glad you brought up Malcolm Young, because I had, just as the Gibson SG from Angus Young is iconic. So I'm glad you brought up his brother Malcolm.
Oh yeah. It is, again, these guitars are so many of them are so personal to the guitarist that I thought this was a great place to start. What's one of the first artists that you want to bring up and their iconic guitars?
So a guitarist that immediately came to mind, and I wish I liked a little bit more of their music. I liked the little bit that I've heard, but the band Cheap Trick and the guitarist Rick Nielsen has some wacky fucking guitars. Oh, yeah. And is another artist that Scott Ian, I wish he would release a fucking signature series. He has quite possibly the only one in existence, a Jackson Flying V with the checkerboard pattern that Rick Nielsen has. And Scott Ian plays that on stage, and I'm like, I want that guitar. Like, I want that. He's like, Scott Ian is the reason I decided to get a Jackson. And it's so cool to see him having this Jackson that looks like Rick Nielsen's guitars. And I know Scott Ian has been on stage like playing one of Rick Nielsen's. I believe it's his Hamer Explorer, or at least the Explorer shape that is checkerboard. And like, I love all the checkerboard stuff, but I think quite possibly the wackiest of his guitars is his 5-neck guitar. Yeah. Which, like, I'm reading about it, and apparently he would perform on stage with like 3 or 4 guitars stacked up. And he would play a guitar and then take it off and then play the next guitar and take it off. And he reaches out to Hamer Guitars. And he's like, hey, can I just get one guitar that does this? And originally he wanted like a roulette wheel guitar that he could just spin around and play, but instead they just went with the 5 different guitars, and they're all like different types of guitars. Like, I think one's supposed to be a Gibson Les Paul and one's supposed to be a Strat, and like it's just 5 different guitars attached to each other. And there's been multiples of them. The first one was just a bright orange, but eventually there's a checkerboard pattern of that. And so I felt like I had to talk about Rick Nielsen and his wacky ass guitars. He's got other guitars that are like in the shape of him, and it's a double neck where the 2 necks are like his legs, and the headstocks go in opposite directions like his feet. They're just crazy looking guitars. And like, God. I love that he's kind of, cultivated this persona of being the guitar player from Cheap Trick with the craziest looking guitars. Yeah. Like it's like a parody of guitar players where, Jimmy Page had the double-necked SG, and the natural evolution of that is to have a 5-necked guitar. I'm sure it exists. I remember as a kid thinking it would be cool to have a double-necked bass and guitar. And so this way I could play a guitar and then play bass. So, like, I knew I had to bring up Rick Nielsen, especially his 5-neck guitar, but I love the look of his checkerboard Explorer, and then, of course, Scott Ian, who has his own checkerboard Flying V that I desperately want.
Could you just imagine the phone call? Like, Rick Nielsen just reaching out to Hamer and being like, hey, so currently I'm wearing 5 separate guitars on stage, and I just want to combine them all into one guitar. And the person on the other line's like, all right, but why are you wearing all 5 at once? Why not just keep them in the back? Like, we can sell you a storage unit if you need.
I think he played like one right after another in a solo. So, like, it's not like in between songs he was changing guitar. Within the same guitar solo, he would play 4 different guitars.
That's okay.
Yeah.
It goes to 11, but with guitar necks. Jesus.
Yeah.
All right. Why not just wait? Holy. Oh, my God. You know what, though? You brought up multiple necks. And it makes me think of my next guitar and guitarist. And that is the double neck jet fighter or gun guitar, that of Michelangelo Batio. This guy is such a guitar freak. And like, when I was first thinking of this episode, I was like, oh, this is just going to be me talking about a bunch of different shred guitarists, like instrumental guitarists and stuff like that. But Michelangelo Batio has played with a lot of different bands, and I think he's playing with Manowar currently. And I love him. He's so weird and heavy metal. And I don't mean weird in like a judgmental way, but he kind of looks like a human chia pet. He's got like the sheepdog haircut like my son has, and he plays the guitar in such a weird way. So I remember trying to find out why he played this way, and it turns out that he's ambidextrous, and he's actually more so a lefty. He does pretty much everything else. I've watched interviews with him, and for a while back in the day, you would buy Guitar World magazine, and in the back of the magazine, it would come with a CD-ROM that you could throw into your computer and watch like lessons and different interviews with artists and gear spotlights and stuff like that. So he had a column for a while, and I remember him talking about the fact that he did pretty much everything else with his left hand, but he was ambidextrous, so he did do a few things with his right. Playing guitar was one of those things he decided to do righty.
Yeah.
So in order for him to feel stable enough with his right hand being his picking hand, he would anchor his fingers down onto the body of the guitar. So he's like pivoting off of the body of the guitar like that. It's the weirdest technique I've ever seen. But weirder than that, the fact that he's ambidextrous, he decided to take advantage of the fact that he can use both hands. So he has this double neck guitar that looks like something out of Spinal Tap with like the woman with her legs open, or no, it's Pick a Destiny, where it's the 2 necks, but it's 2 sets of pickups in the middle of the guitar that go out to either end, and he's just playing down each side. And it's the coolest thing I've ever seen. He'll play harmony lines on there. He'll smash down a power chord on one hand while tapping out a lead line on the other. It's the wildest thing I've ever seen. And like, I've seen videos of people doing it on like, what is that website called? Omegle? Like the where you get like a random person on there. And it's like, all right, great. That's instead of someone being a weird pervert, it's a dude with like one guitar and he's just tapping on there, and then he moves over and now it's two necks.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michelangelo Batio playing this like double-necked, two-handed guitar. So now it's not two necks, one on top of the other. It's on opposite sides. Yeah. And the thing looks like a jet fighter. It looks like rusted metal with rivets in it. Yeah. And it's the coolest, weirdest fucking thing. And only someone that looks like Michelangelo Batio could play something like that. Like, you'll see this guy and it just makes sense. Chris, do you have any other like really odd, weird guitars that lend to some like weird techniques maybe?
So a guitarist who has, I would say, had flawless technique was Eddie Van Halen. And of course, he had his famous Frankenstein, which was a mix of Gibson and Fender parts that were just like, hey, these are the parts of guitars that's going to let me play in this new crazy way that I want to play in.
Yeah.
And so he just had all of these parts. I think he slapped like a Gibson sticker on it, even though it was in the shape of a Fender, and like had like the Fender, obviously it had like a Fender Strat body. It had like Gibson pickups or like humbucker pickups that would normally be in a Gibson. It had the Fender whammy bar, which eventually became a Floyd Rose whammy bar. Like, it was crazy. But then it's also cool, like, I always picture it in my head as having the red paint job with the black and white stripes.
Right.
But originally it was just black and white. And he added the red because everyone was copying his style. Yeah. And he was like, fuck you guys, I'm painting it red. But this was another guitar that kind of immediately came to mind when you brought this episode up, because I was like, again, the design is so iconic that like, it's been used for like Van Halen best of CDs. That's just the paint job on his Frankenstein. Like, it's his decision to paint his guitar in a crazy way became like the branding for the band, which is just like, how much more connected to the guitar and the band can you get, where the guitarist decision to use like Schwinn bicycle paint on his guitar, that becomes what the band's branding is. And I think that shows how iconic of a guitar and how iconic of a guitarist Eddie Van Halen was, and how important he was to everything that was Van Halen, that the whole band was like, yeah, his crazy looking guitar, that's our logo now. Like, that's, so it's it kind of shows what we were saying at the beginning, where like the guitar is so iconic, even if another artist decided they were going to play that guitar, you'd be like, no, that's the Van Halen guitar. Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, you're playing Van Halen's guitar. And it's so interesting how it is so connected in that way, that like, even though Angus Young, yes, he's known for playing the SG. Tony Iommi also plays an SG. There's plenty of people that play SGs. With Eddie Van Halen, it's the paint job that is like, no, there's only one. No one else has a Strat or a Strat-shaped guitar that looks like that. And if they do, it's just copying Van Halen.
Oh, yeah. And that is like, that is exactly what we're talking about. Like, you all you have to see is the paint job, and immediately you know what guitarist this belongs to.
Yeah.
And it embodied the spirit of hot rodding your instruments that was so popular in the late 70s, early 80s, and went into like the hair metal era. The reason that the Super Strat became so popular Jackson, Charvel, like all of these brands took off because of Eddie Van Halen. Because Eddie, and I've said this time and time again on the podcast, I know I said it on our David Lee Roth versus Hagar episode. Eddie was playing guitar like Eddie. Everyone else was trying to adapt his language, but he literally wrote the language out himself. Yeah. He invented the language, and everyone else was just trying to adapt to it or copy it in their own way. Down to the guitars, down to the fact that, he was like, the reason that his guitar sounds the way it sounds, obviously there's the amp and everything involved, but him winding the pickups himself, him dipping the pickup into the wax and like leaving it in there for just the right amount of time, that was perfect. And like you mentioned, the bicycle paint, using the bicycle paint on there, the fact that he took off the traditional strap buttons and he put on like the eyelet, like the hook on there, so that he could wear like something that would actually hook on, so no matter what he was doing, running around, jumping around on stage, that guitar would never fall off of him. The bike reflectors on the back of the guitar. There are so many details that went into this that was just him customizing it to fit the needs that he had. He had so many techniques that were so uniquely his that he didn't want it to be mistaken who this was coming from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you bring up, like, calling people out and being like, nah, dude, like, I know what you're trying to do playing this guitar, but that's not your signature guitar.
Yeah.
That makes me think of Randy Rhoads and his kind of like cream white colored Les Paul Custom. Randy Rhoads was such an iconic guitarist, and he was gone way too soon.
Yeah.
And although a lot of people think of him as having designed that offset flying V for Jackson, or even the real big, like, Concorde polka dotted flying V with the really weird arrow-shaped headstock, it's that white Les Paul that he was really known for using. And Randy and Eddie kind of had a feud going on the Sunset Strip. Like, Randy did not like Eddie, and he did not like Van Halen. And so when he saw the stripes come out, that's when he started using the polka dots. And like back when he was in Quiet Riot, everything was polka dot. He had polka dot outfits, his polka dot bow tie. So he was really known for that, but it was that white Les Paul that he was so known for. And so when Zakk Wylde joins Ozzy's band, him being such an enormous fan of Randy Rhoads, he said, there's no way that me, this young kid from Jersey with long blonde hair, all chopped up, kind of trying to look like Randy Rhoads, is going to be able to walk on that stage with a white Les Paul Custom and not have every single person in that audience hating me. So Zakk said, okay, they're going to hate me anyway. Let me paint a bullseye on there to let them know where to throw their beer cans. And that was the birth of the iconic Zakk Wylde bullseye, something so iconic that I have it tattooed on myself right there, baby. I drew that in the margins of my notebook in high school. That is one of those tattoos. Oh, yeah. And I love that story so much because he was kind of owning the fact that, like, people are going to think I'm an imposter if I try to go up there with this guitar that is the guitar of my hero. So I've got to find a way to make it uniquely my own, you know? And I could have gone with like the burnt up Confederate flag guitar with all the beer tops in it.
Yeah.
I could have gone with any, literally anything from his Wylde Audio line of guitars that he has now. But the white Les Paul Custom with the bullseye is just so iconic. For more reasons than just the bullseye, it's the fact that he was also taking out the stock Gibson pickups and using EMGs in there, which are such a high output pickup, which really helped to lend to that signature, the squeal that he does, the Zakk Wylde and Black Label Society squeal, the No More Tears squeal. Yes. I love it so much. And something that I wound up doing on my SG, because I read time and time again, two things that I did to my SG. He would wrap his strings, instead of wrapping them from the back of the tailpiece straight through to the neck and like the tuning pegs, he would actually wrap them backwards, wrap them from the inside and wrap them around the tailpiece because it helped to cut down on how many strings he was breaking. And as soon as I did that, I was like, oh, this is genius. All right, you're just changing the angle that the string is hitting the bridge at. This is real guitar nerd stuff. When I hear guys talk about like, so yeah, the displacement of my engine is this, and I make, 943 horsepower to the wheels. This is like, it sounds like Greek to me, but I'm around it all day long. And for me, this is my gear talk. So I'm sorry if I'm nerding the fuck out right now. Chris, just put in an animation of a nerd alarm going off. But, so it's the wrapping of the strings around the tailpiece itself, which helps the resonance for the notes themselves and cuts down on the string breakage. But it was also shaving down the back of the neck on my guitar. My SG, I love that thing so much. And a couple times when I was younger, because I was like 13, 14 maybe when I first got it, it would, I'd lay it aside a table or something and it would fall and it'd get a little chip in the back of the neck. So then I started chipping away at the paint because it's like this, it gets sticky. I've got sweaty hands. Yeah. So my hands would get sticky along the neck. So I started peeling the paint off and then I took a nail file and started filing it down and it's smooth now. And now it's just got that really smooth feel to it, and Zakk did that as well. And I remember reading that. That's why I was like not afraid to do it. And in fact, it made me feel like I'm like, cool, I'm a little bit closer to Zakk Wylde in that way because now I shave the back of my neck too. But I think it just shows how we are all, like any musician or anyone who appreciates music is just a fan themselves. And he was super aware of the fact that people would call him out for trying to copy Randy, even if that wasn't his intention, Chris, I know you've brought up someone who loves to copy other guitarists' guitars. I am dying to know who you're talking about.
Well, I feel like I've already mentioned a couple times Scott Ian and how he has the Rick Nielsen guitars and how he's played guitars that look like he's picked up Malcolm Young's guitars. And I feel like that was kind of what I was alluding to, is the fact that he just kind of copies the designs from other artists. I do want to say I wish I had learned that technique of wrapping the strings around, because when I was in high school and college, I broke my strings all the fucking time because I was beating up my guitar. Like the first songs I learned were Misfits songs. Okay. So I was playing Doyle's technique of punch your guitar. Yeah. So like, I wish I knew that, because I would break strings and break picks all the time. And I remember I was friends with a guy who was like, I've been using the same guitar pick for years. How are you breaking your strings and your picks all the time? And I'm like, I don't know, dude, but I need the thickest picks on the market, and I need to buy like 6 sets of strings at a time because I am constantly breaking my strings and breaking my guitar picks. But I do want to mention something, because you mentioned Randy Rhoads, and I think I mentioned that I did buy myself a Jackson because of Scott Ian and the way he plays Jacksons. Yeah. And at the time, I loved my Les Paul, but I was like, it's time for me to buy a Pointy guitar. So originally I was looking at BC Rich guitars, the classic Warlock, that like Kerry King plays. I looked at one of those. I think I picked up a Kerry King BC Rich Flying V signature, and I tried that out, but I was like, this guitar is even heavier than the Les Paul. So I was like, all right, let me find something else. You got to take the
chains off.
Yeah, exactly. So then I was looking at like the Jacksons, because I was like, all right, I love Scott Ian, another guitarist that I love. Let me copy off of him the way he copies off of Rick Nielsen. So I think I picked up, there was like an Among the Living signature that had like a Strat shaped body. I really didn't like it. I think I picked up another Strat shaped body. I really didn't like it. But then I picked up a Jackson Rhoads, one of those flying Vs with the long horn, like on his second flying V. And I loved it. I picked it up and I sat down with it. And you have to sit with that differently than you do with the Strat or the Les Paul. Gotta ride that like a classical guitar in between your legs. And so that was weird, but like it just felt so good to pick that up and play that guitar. And so I actually wanted to bring up that was a Randy Rhoads design, that he wanted that longer horn so that it wouldn't look like a normal flying V, because his first Charvel Jackson, I read a little bit that it seemed like Charvel had left, and Grover Jackson, who was left in charge of Charvel, was like, this doesn't really look like a Charvel guitar. Let's call this a Jackson. And that was the white Concorde. That was the first guitar that Randy Rhoads designed. But then when he designed the second Concorde that was black with the longer horn, that's the Rhoads line that Jackson still sells now and that I bought. And I love that guitar. And I wanted to bring it up because it was something that Randy Rhoads designed. And it was like, hey, this is what I want my guitar to look like. And the company decided, hey, we can make a shitload of money with this. Yeah. Which is really cool, but I think it's also really cool. Like, at the time, I wasn't even someone who was like a huge Randy Rhoads fan. I knew who he was, but I didn't buy it because it was Randy Rhoads. I bought it because it was pointy, and it was lighter than my Les Paul. And Scott Ian plays Jacksons. His Jacksons mostly are either the Strat shape or the full V. But I love that this was the offset V, and it looked really cool, which is super important. And so, I know you brought up Randy Rhoads, but I wanted to make sure in my notes that I brought it up as well, because I love owning that guitar. I love the look of that guitar. Like I said, I needed a pointy guitar. It did make me think of the time trying to form a band with my brother and some coworkers, and a guy comes over and he has a BC Rich Warlock. And he's like trying to like serenade one of the girls with like a Dave Matthews song or something, playing it on a Warlock. And I don't have so all I have is my Les Paul, and I'm playing like fucking like Slayer on my Les Paul, and he's playing Dave Matthews on his Warlock. But it's, whatever, we all need a pointy guitar at some point in our lives, no matter what you decide to play on it.
Yep, absolutely. I can just imagine. It's this fucking guitar that looks like a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that you brought up BC Rich, because BC Rich gets so much shit for being like, it's the typical like shitty sounding tone, and they're like just overblown machismo in guitar form. And it's like, all those things are true, but at the same time, they look cool as fuck, all right? And that's probably even more important than what a guitar sounds like. For so many of us, though, it's okay, how cool does this guitar look? Does this guitar look badass? Does this look like... especially BC Rich. BC Rich became famous for having all of these really crazy offset pointy shapes and things like that, things that you weren't really seeing. I remember, like reading about how when they came out with the Flying V, when Gibson first came out with the Flying V, people were like, what the fuck is this? The Flying V was wild to them, and meanwhile the BC Rich, what is it, not the Warlock, like the War Beast or something like that, like that exists. You know what I mean? And like, it is so funny that BC Rich just has that reputation for having over-the-top, ridiculous guitars. And like I said, sometimes it's almost more important how the guitar looks than how it sounds or plays. And that makes me think of Meegs Rascon from Cold Chamber. His Lucite BC Rich Mockingbird. I'm pretty sure it's the Mockingbird shape. This thing haunted my dreams. I wanted one so bad as a kid. I remember seeing them in Guitar World and like Hit Parader and Circus Magazine. I forget like what year. It must have been like 2002, 2001, 2002 or so. But it was this green Lucite guitar, and Lucite is like an epoxy or something. Like it's a plastic kind of material. Yeah. So this guitar was just see-through.
Yes.
Green. So you could see all of the electronics and all the wiring for the pickups and stuff like that.
I would see it in Guitar Center all the time and see this fucking see-through green guitar hanging all the way up at the top, and I'm like, I kind of want that, because that is the craziest looking fucking guitar I've ever seen.
And if you've ever seen Meegs from Coal Chamber, it makes sense, especially back then. Like, we talk about how nu metal was just about, like, how crazy you could look and, like, looking like you're so fucking, like, out there.
Yeah, the fucking head tilt.
The head tilt. Yeah, so this guitar makes you do the nu metal head tilt. And Lucite is just not a good tone conductor. It sounds like shit. And it's heavy as fuck. And I remember trying one once, and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to try this. It's when I bought my Jackson Dinky. I was like, let me try that thing real quick. Just because I've always wanted to, let me just try that real quick. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. But for Meegs, it worked. And that's what matters. It doesn't have to work for anyone else.
Oh, yeah.
It has to work for you. It has to work for you, and it has to inspire creativity. It has to be something that you can reach for and be comfortable enough for you to get out whatever idea it is that you have in your head at the time. And I guess his idea was just let me get the nastiest looking thing I possibly can and play music on it. And Meegs was like super into trying to do things that no one else was doing. I believe it's on the Garza podcast. He was on recently, and he talked about how he would go into music shops and be like, what kind of gauge strings are people using nowadays? Like, everyone's tuning to drop B or lower. Like, what are you guys using now? And they're like, oh, they'll usually throw like 12s or 13s on there if they're getting really low, you know? And he's like, cool, can you give me like a 16 gauge, like whatever the lowest set is? And they're like, no, like, we're gonna have to route the nut, like, we're gonna have to route everything because it's just not gonna fit. He's like, I want that though. I want you to make me a custom string, the lowest string, and I want it to be like a bass string pretty much.
Yeah,
because Coal Chamber was using this super, super low tuning.
He sounds like he's like, yeah, can you just put bass strings on my guitar?
Yeah.
Like
pretty much. But they were also playing on a regular guitar scale length. So it's not like he was playing in a baritone or something that would like give him some more of the resistance. He just put heavier strings on there so that when he's playing in that super low tuning, he wasn't losing any of the string tension. I don't know how he was playing it. He must have the worst like tendonitis in his hands now. But yeah, a lot of times a guitar just has to make sense for you. Like what we were saying with Eddie Van Halen, like I don't think that anyone else can pick up his exact guitar and ever sound like him, because it's the connection between the guitarist and their guitar. And as long as it works for you, that's really what matters. You know, kind of like how nowadays people are, we went through this thing with tattoos where like tattoos used to just be like super badass looking, right? Like you a bullseye that you drew in your notebook in high school, and you're like, yeah, fuck yeah. When I turn 18, that's what I'm going to get. I drove to the Bronx. I had friends drive me to the Bronx to get this tattoo. My parents didn't even know I was out there for a tattoo. I came home with it, and they were like, oh my God. So it's just about like having something that looks cool, that speaks to you, and that you're able to make that connection with, you know? I feel like I was going on I had another point that I wanted to make, but I lost it in there, talking about stupid decisions of my youth.
So you brought up an interesting point about how a guitar needs to feel right for you.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you know, growing up, like I said, with my dad's guitars, thankfully I felt very comfortable playing my dad's guitars. Mm-hmm. In school, in the orchestra, I played the bass, and we would choose which bass we were going to play. And I could only play certain basses because certain basses felt right, and other basses I did not like the way the neck felt. I did not like the way it sat against my body. Like there were all these different things. And I feel like there's been times where I've gone into Guitar Center just to play different guitars, and there are guitars that are iconic looks that just don't feel right. Like I said, I picked up a BC Rich. I didn't like how heavy it was.
Yeah.
I picked up the Strat-shaped Jacksons. I didn't like the way it felt. I think I've picked up like Gibson SGs, and I didn't like the way it felt. But Epiphone SGs, for some reason, feel fine. So I will play any Epiphone, but Gibson, I think, just doesn't work for me. Okay. But obviously, all of the iconic shapes, like an SG, a Les Paul, the Flying V, Explorer. It started with Gibson.
Yeah.
And what I found interesting is when I was getting into Metallica, and James Hetfield has all of these Explorer-shaped guitars.
Yeah.
And like almost none of them are actually Gibsons. I think most of them are actually ESP Explorers, which was very interesting to learn as I'm learning about playing guitar and learning about all these different brands. I'm like, wait, so everyone makes an Explorer, everyone makes a Les Paul, everyone makes a Flying V. Gibson might have started it. Everyone else is just, less expensive or their own take on these shapes.
Yeah.
And I know when you suggested this episode, you mentioned his James Hetfield's Eat Fuck Explorer.
Yeah.
And I read a little bit about it, how he was playing either a Gibson or a different ESP Explorer, because he has like 4 or 5 different white Explorers that all just say different stuff on them.
Yeah.
And for this one, he asked ESP for a custom headstock because he wanted it bigger. He was like, I want it to look like a hockey stick.
The old hockey stick headstocks, yeah.
And so like that one, besides the fact that it says eat fuck along it, the headstock is such a different shape that it makes that particular Explorer, stand out a little bit amongst some of his other plain white or off-white Explorers that he plays.
Yeah.
The first Explorer I saw him play was probably, I want to say it's a diamond plate Explorer in the I Disappear music video.
Okay.
That's probably the first Explorer I saw him play.
Funny, diamond plate. That might come back sometime soon.
But yeah, the Explorer shape, it's such a cool looking guitar. And as I got into Metallica and see the old music videos of him playing this white Explorer, like that is James Hetfield's guitar, whether it's the Eat Fuck or the So What or whatever it is. He's got so many. That white Explorer is kind of the signature James Hetfield guitar at this point. And, I'm sure part of it is like, hey, that's the classic look. And then you were talking about how cool a guitar looks. And I see it discussed online all the time where people are like, do bands like really need to change their guitars that often? And it's like, in some cases, yes, it's easier for a guitarist to just switch from his standard to half a step down to a drop D guitar instead of retuning on stage. But there's plenty of times where a guy is playing his entire set list in standard and he's playing a different guitar for every song because he just has some really cool looking guitars and wants to show them all off on stage. Yep. And so I'm sure there's some of that with James Hetfield as well, because I think, like I was just saying, when I think of Metallica, I think of the white Explorer. Yeah. But if someone else thinks of his like Truckster Les Paul, which is I forget, because he's got 2 Les Pauls, one that has like a rusted metal look and then the one that has like the iron cross and like a gold stripe on it.
Yes.
I forget which one is the Truckster. It might be the one with the iron cross.
No, I think it's the one that has that weird like rusted.
The rusted
metal. It looks like it's like primer. It's like different coats of paint that have like been rubbed off or something.
Yeah, but I think something that we've talked about in the past, I forget in what context, but the idea of like, if you're introduced to a band, the band wants you to have that experience of that's what you're introduced to. So if the first thing you see is James Hetfield playing a Diamond Plate Explorer in an I Disappear music video, or he might be playing his Truckster or the Iron Cross one in the Saint Anger music video, if that's your introduction to the band might kind of want to give you that experience of like, okay, yes, we have fans who remember when I was playing the Off-White Explorer in the mid-'80s, but we also have fans who love my new Les Paul that I only started playing in the past 15 years. Yeah. And so I want to give people that experience as well. So I'm sure it's a mix of giving the audience the experience of seeing all these cool guitars, and then also the guitarists just wanting to show off all of my cool fucking guitars.
Yeah. Yeah, it would feel wrong to see them playing Creeping Death on one of the newer Les Pauls.
Yes.
Like it's got to be on his Flying V right? Which I think is not an actual Gibson. Is that not like a Chinese knockoff Gibson?
It might be. I might have a page open.
And while you look that up, big shout out to Kirk Hammett too for having so many cool guitars.
Yes.
That's a great example of someone being like, nope, bring out the Mummy guitar, bring out the Frankenstein guitar, bring out the Ouija, bring out the one with the blood through it, the see-through one with the blood. It's like, yeah, sometimes it's not necessary for them to switch, but it's just cool. It's all part of the concert experience, and it's cool to be able to see them just going through their whole entire like gauntlet of guitars.
Yeah, the Flying V is credited as being an Electra flying wedge.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Like that's and it's him, Kill 'Em All era playing this knockoff Flying V, and his So What Explorer is a Gibson, but the Eat Fuck is an ESP, and he's got the Flying Vs and another Explorer that's actually all right. Yeah, it's actually more Gibsons than I thought, but I know like I think some of Kirk Hammett's iconic guitars are ESPs.
Yeah.
There's more ESPs. Yeah, he's got a good mix of ESPs. And Gibson. It's everything.
And a lot of these guitars too, like you mentioned, were taking the iconic Gibson and Fender shapes, right? Like every Jackson, Ibanez, and Charvel, like any brand that's out there, ESP is taking what Leo Fender did, and like now trying to perfect it, and they are trying to perfect it for whatever that style of music is that is going to be made on it, right? Yeah. Like if you're going to play really, really fast shredding metal, you're going to take a Strat shape with the big cutaways so that you can reach the higher frets and have it just be easier to play. You're going to have a really thin neck. You're going to have the bezel on the side so that your arm's not digging into it. If you're going to be making a, the Explorer, you're going to want something that has the cool, you don't need the different tone knobs and things like that. If you're playing heavy metal on it, you need just a volume on there. You know what I mean? Like you're stripping it down. You want the hockey stick look to the headstock so that it just looks cool. And Dean guitars were doing a lot of the same thing. A lot of brands wound up facing copyright infringement, like lawsuits and stuff like that. I think Dean was one of those brands because basically their idea behind the Dean ML was to take the Explorer shape and just go, well, what if someone just took a bite out of the end there, and instead of it being this big chunk of metal at the very end, let's have it be like an X shape now.
Yep.
And, then at some point in Texas in the 70s or so, some young kid decides to enter a guitar playing contest. And the prize for that guitar playing contest was a Dean ML. And who wins this Dean ML but Dimebag Darrel Abbott of Pantera? And it is so insane to think that the Dean from Hell, his love affair with that guitar started from him winning a Dean ML in that guitar contest. There are pictures. Again, I was a huge Guitar World nerd. Like I would collect these magazines because I loved the stories behind how guitarists came to fall in love with that particular instrument. What makes that number one. Yeah. What makes that, signature model so special to them? Why did they customize the profile of the neck? Why did they change the windings in the pickups? All those things. Like with Zakk, why does he put his strings on that way? Yeah. I loved reading about that. And Dimebag was able to create such an iconic look where he had the guitar painted with the black bass, with the blue burst and the lightning bolt.
Yeah.
What's more iconic than that? And it's so funny that Dime and Vinnie Paul, their career trajectories were so similar to Eddie and Alex Van Halen in that I say it's the first album, but the first one that anyone really cares about.
The first one anyone gives a shit about.
Yeah.
The first one where they decided to rip off Exhorder. Yes, I know which one you're talking about.
So on the cover of Cowboys from Hell, Dime is playing the Dean from Hell, the Lightning Bolt Dean ML.
Yeah.
Just the way that on Van Halen 1, Eddie has that iconic Frankenstrat.
Yep.
It speaks volumes, no pun intended, to the fact that it's so important to be able to show off your instrument, your chosen instrument. There are many like it, but this is mine.
Yeah.
You know, it's you are showing the world, like, this is the instrument that I use to craft the music that I hear inside my head. And I love Dime as a guitar player. He, I think, was one of the last true guitar heroes in the sense of the word. Nowadays, we kind of live in the era of, like, man, this guitarist on social media is like a shredder. He is so good. But, like, hero, where people, like, outside of the metal world would be able to recognize this person's guitar playing and, like, and stuff like that and appreciate that. I think he was truly one of the last ones. And with that comes his Dean from Hell. It's just such an iconic piece of gear. People, like, try and chase the tone. They try and, like, do their best tribute to that sound that he was able to create with them. But again, it's the connection between the guitarist and the guitar, and you can take the exact same instrument and the exact same equipment, but it's not to sound like, people make fun of boomers now when they're like, the tone's all in the hands, but it is. It is. It's all in the way that you play that instrument. It's how you play that instrument. It's what you are saying with that instrument that matters. And that's what makes this discussion of the most famous guitars and who they belong to so special. We're not just talking about the great music that they're making, but why those instruments spoke to them as artists. Chris, I'm really glad that we got to go through our individual guitar collections and the guitar collections of so many different guitarists. The guitar is such a magical instrument, and I feel like I always sound like such an idealist when I talk about music in this way, but it's true. There's such a deep connection between a musician and their instrument, and I'm so happy that we get to keep collecting instruments. I know I'm going to be buying more and more guitars in the future. I just recently bought a baritone. That thing fucking rips. But I want to hear about one last guitar as your suggestion. What do you got for us?
So my suggestion for this episode is Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, which is a supergroup cover band of some SoCal punk rock band members that used to include Fat Mike of NoFX, and particularly their live album, Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, Ruined Johnny's Bar Mitzvah.
Okay, right.
On the cover of this album, one of the guitarists, Joey Cape, is holding the wackiest looking guitar, like guitars that I've ever seen. Like, definitely rivals Rick Nielsen in terms of the wackiness of this guitar. It looks like something out of the Jetsons, honestly. And it's like a silver and blue flying V-ish that kind of looks like a spaceship that was made by Daisy Guitars, who makes like guitars for little girls in the shapes of like flowers and everything. Which, like, does remind me of a story when I was in a guitar center and a girl was buying a guitar with, like, her parents, and the salesman was, like, trying to push one of these guitars on her, but she seemed unsure, and then the salesman left, and the girl was trying to play it, but she seemed interested in another guitar, and me and my dad were both like, don't let this guy tell you which fucking guitar you should get. Pick up whatever guitar you want in this room, and if you like the way it feels, that's the guitar you get. You want to play a guitar that feels good, like we were saying before. Don't let this guy tell you should play a guitar in the shape of a flower if you think that feels dumb. If you want to play one of these other guitars, play that guitar.
She walked out of there with a fucking BC Rich Warlock.
But it does make me think that playing this guitar must feel super fucking weird. And I'd love to get an opportunity to play it because it is on display at the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas. And you can go into the jam room and play this guitar. But like I said, it's such a crazy looking guitar. Joey Cape is holding it on the album cover for Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, Ruin Johnny's Bar Mitzvah. And off of this album, of course, you have some great songs. You have covers of Come Sail Away. You have a cover of Strawberry Fields Forever, The Longest Time. And then one of the funniest is they play Hava Nagila, and then they play Hava Nagila Christmas Arrangement, which is Hava Nagila to the tune of Feliz Navidad. So they're like, Hava Nagila, Hava Nagila, and it's so funny. And then I think the other part is, I want to wish you a Rosh Hashanah. I want to wish you a Rosh Hashanah. So it's a very fun album. I definitely suggest people check out this album and definitely take a close look at Joey Cape's guitar. Like I said, it looks like something out of the fucking Jetsons. It's crazy. But that's my suggestion. Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, Ruin Johnny's Bar Mitzvah.
That is fucking incredible. I feel like you've brought up the Christmas arrangement before. It sounds vaguely familiar, but I'll have to go back and listen to prior episodes, which you should too. So we've talked about how personal the connection is between a guitar and the guitarist, and I've always wondered how I would deal with not being able to play guitar. Being a musician myself, being someone who's played guitar since I was very, very young. And that's why I want to suggest to everyone to check out Jason Becker. His colorful numbers guitar, it's like a maple guitar, like a very light colored guitar with a maple neck, but the frets are numbered and the numbers are just colorful. And I love the look of that guitar, especially when you consider the fact that Jason Becker can no longer play his guitar. He is an icon of 80s neoclassical guitar. He and Marty Friedman of Megadeth started out in the band Cacophony, which is literally just the two of them playing the wildest neoclassical shred guitar that you've ever heard. And Jason Becker was so well known for like his guitar tricks, not just his guitar playing, but his guitar tricks too. He would like get up on stage and just play with one hand along the string, along the neck, while he's yo-yoing with the other hand. Like, he was so good. And he was playing in the David Lee Roth band, I believe, after Steve Vai left to join Whitesnake. I believe it was Jason who took his place, and it was while he was touring with the David Lee Roth band that he was first diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, with ALS. And this is such a terrible disease. It is a disease that when he got when they gave him the diagnosis, they were like, you're probably not going to make it to 30. You'd be lucky if you make it to 35. Jason Becker is still with us, and Jason Becker is still making music, thanks to the ingenuity of his father. His father came up with a program that reads the movement of his eyes off of this grid so that he's able to compose music, which is exactly why I say the connection between a guitarist and their guitar is one thing, but the music is just always there.
Yeah.
This man is so iconic, and this guitar, it looks very childish almost, and there's this purity to the design, the simplicity of the natural finish of the body and just the colorful numbers along the neck, which speaks to me so loudly. And just we as a podcast just want to give so much love to Jason Becker for the fact that he's still giving us music to listen to, of which you should check out Air, Perpetual Burn, and Altitudes. as well as everything that he did with Marty Friedman and Cacophony, and do what I used to do in like 2004, 2005, I don't know, whenever YouTube first came out. I used to just look up videos of Jason Becker and Marty Friedman just trading guitar solos. They're like sitting in a studio or like a radio station, and it's just the two of them. Just like one's playing chords and the other one will rip a solo. Crazy solo. And then they trade. Then Jason's playing chords and Marty's playing a crazy solo. And it's just so phenomenal to be able to see someone truly prove that the music is inside. It just needs a way to get out, and the guitar is that instrument, but you can't fucking stop it.
Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way, and Jason Becker has that will. So check out Anything You Can by Jason Becker.
Yeah, I know you've talked about Cacophony before, because I seem to remember you saying out-licking one another.
Yes. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Holy shit, that was early on too.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning into the Scrap Metal Podcast. The time has come for us to pack up our gear, but we'll be back to rock out with you in the next episode.
Stay metal, everyone.
Good night.